answer a few basic questions that we keep getting over and over about spurs. When to put spurs on a horse? What do you use spurs for? When do you know if you're good enough to use spurs, etc., etc. So I'm just going to give you some general guidelines here. It doesn't mean what I'm saying is a hard and fast rule, but just general guidelines. So the first misconception people think about spurs is people think spurs are necessarily meant for speed. They can be, but in my program, as a good rule of thumb, no, I'm not using them to speed a horse up. I'm using spurs to encourage a horse's body to move laterally off my leg. So I use spurs to get a horse's body to be soft and supple and to encourage them to move off the calf of my leg when I'm moving their body parts laterally, shoulders, ribs, and hips, etc. When do I put spurs on a horse? Well, first of all, I wouldn't tell anybody in my own program and my own Method Ambassador students, I don't use spurs until your horse has enough respect that you could go from a standstill into a walk, trot, or canter off a gentle squeeze. So in my method, it's squeeze. If that doesn't work, cluck. If that doesn't work, spank. And we spank with the end of our Macati or end of our reins to encourage the horse to go forward. So squeeze is I'm asking you, cluck is I'm warning you, and spank is I'm telling you. So each horse has got their own level of sensitivity, but as a general rule, it's squeeze, I'm asking you politely, cluck is I'm warning you, and spank is I'm telling you we mean business now, okay? So if you can't get your horse to go from a standstill into a walk, or a standstill to a trot, or a standstill to a dead lope, straight into a lope, off a gentle squeeze, you don't need spurs. Why? If you put spurs on before your horse has enough respect from your bare heel, your calves of your legs, you'll always be relying on spurs for forward motion. Again, I don't use spurs necessarily for forward motion. I use them to move my body parts laterally off my leg. Okay? If your horse is so hypersensitive that as soon as you touch him with a bare leg, he's jumping out from underneath you, he's taking off, he's running away from your legs, again, you don't want spurs. I want my horse to be respectful of my calf of my leg or my heel, but I don't want him to be fearful of it. Okay? So, typically when we start a colt, we'll ride them roughly around about 14 rides and we won't have any spurs on. By the time we get to the 14th ride, we've usually got them moving forward really well, walk, trot, and canter, a gentle squeeze, we don't have to cluck or spank to encourage forward movement. And you might say, well, Clinton, why don't you just not use spurs forever? And you can. But in my method, I like to get a horse really soft and supple through their body parts, bending their rib cage. It's very difficult to get a horse to really bend laterally and soften without using the aid of a spur to bend their ribs. Horses love to lean on pressure. So it doesn't take very long for a horse to learn that he can lean into your bare heel and there's no consequences for that, okay? So anytime I'm riding with spurs, I'm always asking a horse to move a certain body part with just the calf of my leg. If that doesn't work, then I'll press with the spur. If that doesn't work, I might roll the spur up and down to make him feel uncomfortable. If that doesn't work, I might bump with the spur. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to kick with the spur. But I start with the calf of my leg, then I press with the spur. If that doesn't work, roll. And you see how I keep escalating the pressure. But the key part is I always start with the calf of my leg first. Okay, that's always the part that I start and finish with, okay? So, can you ride a horse forever without spurs? Yes. But if you're ever going to do any high level of performance, reining, cutting, cow horse, jumping, dressage, horses know when you've got spurs and they know when you don't have them. A lot of horses, you can have a spur on your boot and not have to use it very much or not at all because he knows you've got it. It's kind of like this. When I was a kid, I knew if I screwed up, my old man was going to whip my ass. The fact that I knew he'd do it kept him from having to do it very much. But if I didn't think there was any consequences for screwing up, I'd do it all the time. So again, I don't use spurs for forward motion. Can you kick a horse with spurs to make him go faster? The answer is yes. You can, and occasionally I will, but that's not my main purpose of using them. My main purpose of using them is to encourage a horse to move laterally off my leg, get control of the 5 body parts. So guys, for the next 10 days, we have a sale going on. You buy any of the spurs that Down Under Horsemanship sell, we're going to be giving you 10% off for the next 10 days only.